On today's show, the Capitals walk away from the 2025 draft, adding players with skill and size. I'll break it all down next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Caps as they walk away from the 2025 NHL Draft. And you have to ask yourself a question: is the team in a better position than they were when they went into it? And I'm going to go ahead and say much, much better. I think that Ross Mahoney, Chris Patrick, and his crew knocked it out of the park in the 2025 draft. I'll talk about that a bit later. Trades and behind the scenes and draft vibes. A bit of a different draft this year as it was decentralized, meaning that all of the teams were at their home base. And the pros and cons of all of that, I'll talk about that a bit later. Capitals build with skill and size. And you take a look at the players that were selected. I'm talking about Gästrin, Schäfer, Crowder, Dahlqvist, and more specifically, Lynden Lakovic. This team is in a much, much better in my position. But just to get it going here, the Capitals get their guy in Lynden Lakovic, and I really do believe it. And watching this draft, I do enjoy it. Just big takeaways before I dive into it is I think some teams got better, at least on paper. You know, sometimes these things don't materialize the way that they seem like they're laid out. The Islanders seem like they're a much better team. The Sharks are going to be a powerhouse. Book it in years to come. I saw good improvements from the Penguins and the Flyers. The Bruins had some a good pick in there as well. I think that some teams, like I said, are going to be much, much better. And the Capitals, well, I think they knocked it out of the park as well. You take a look at it, it's a bit different than we remember in some of the previous years where they had, you know, Ryan Leonard and they were higher in the draft. That considering where the Capitals were in the draft and the players that they selected, I continue to marvel at the great job that Ross Mahoney does. So let's dive into that. Let's talk about the man himself, Lynden Lakovic, and kind of a prototypical Capital, if you know what I mean. And what do I mean? A big guy and a guy that knows how to put up big goals. And I think that he checked a lot of the boxes that the Capitals were looking for. Now, listen, it's one of the things that Ross Mahoney said is he said you want to draft the best player available. You don't want to draft by position. And to be clear here, like he said, spots 1 through 40 were primarily better candidates or better options available with forwards and centers. So I think the Capitals did knock it out of the park by picking up Lynden Lakovic, and quite a night at Peacock Theater in LA. And a bit longer, you know, by the end of it, especially since the Capitals were at the end of it, I'm like, wow, this was a great thing to watch, but a bit of a longer night. And as far as Chris Patrick and Ross Mahoney and the crew, they were sweating it out as I think they had Lynden Lakovic circled. And Again, when I talk about these, I think that some people, when they watch the draft, they think it's just random, like we're going to the mall. Do you want to eat at McDonald's or Subway? Subway. It's not like that. There is a lot of different things that go into making these selections, and you have to be able to adjust on the fly, because if a team in front of you picks the player that you want, then you need to adjust and pick player number 2 or player number 3, or trade your spot in the draft. Truly, these guys are playing chess while the rest of us are playing checkers. But in the end, the pick is in, and the Capitals select Lynden Lakovic. Like I said, prototypical. What do I mean? 6'4", over 200 pounds, out of Moose Jaw in the WHL. The kid puts up 27 goals and 58 points in 47 games this past season. And, he is a part of that next wave, of course, a little bit further out than, the next wave, the next wave, shall we say. But I think the Capitals are set up in a truly great position for years to come. And one of the things I like about him is his shot, and guys that can score goals. And when I say this guy has a missile of a shot, I mean it. It is the first things that scouts talk about is his shot and what a missile it is. So like I say, a big guy, kind of gives off Tom Wilson vibes. And, people are like, why do you compare a lot of people to Tom Wilson? I'm going to compare him to Tom Wilson as far as stature is concerned, in having a great shot. The other things that Tom has in his skill set maybe don't apply, but he does fit the bill as far as being a big player. But listen, what really stood out to the front office was more than just his shot. It's the character. He was named captain mid-season after the Moose Jaws traded away some of the veterans on the team. And, like Ross Mahoney said, he said, quote, pretty even-keeled, happy-go-lucky guy, unquote. And it's not just the great shot, also a great skater as well. Again, if he had one of those things, that would be great. But he checked off a lot of boxes. And ultimately, his attitude and where he fits in, the kind of kid you can build a room around. And, it's an interesting time, with the Capitals, as it seemed to be kind of the same core, relatively for quite some time, that we're, kind of really building a team that's going to be truly a knockout in the Metro for years to come. I don't think that there's going to be seasons in the future where the Capitals wander out into the wilderness, perennially. You take a look at the Sabres. That's going to be our year next year. Yeah, okay, Sabres over there. But quite a team they put together, and adding him to the mix is definitely huge. And if you're looking for player comps, this is his words. He said, Tage Thompson and Matthew Nyes, that is some serious company, but a lot to like from him. And, I think that when we see him, at development camp, we're going to get a good lay of the land and kind of what kind of player he is. But this is an exciting time. We talk about exciting times for hockey, and you talk about the regular season. I'm talking about this is kind of the sweet spot for me. The draft and then free agency doesn't really get any better than this. Hockey has not been played for quite some time, but I am already very excited for next season. I understand that we won't see him next season, but just what this team is assembling is quite something. To wrap it up here, big things about him: big frame, quick release, deceptive hands, and he uses his reach really, really well to hide the puck. Could be a top 6 winger in the future. Penciled in as left wing primarily, has played some right wing as well. A knockout. I don't think I could have asked for anything more from Ross Mahoney, Chris Patrick. I think they really knocked it out of the park. And you just kind of see, like I said, what they're starting to assemble, that I think that this team is going to be absolutely stacked for years and years to come. All right, so coming up here after the break, it was not just Lynden Lakovic. They also made some other big additions. Who are those players? I'll break it all down straight ahead. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game with your friends and are getting sunburned at the beach. And listen, it is a great time as baseball is in full swing. My favorite baseball team and yours as well. I'm talking Nationals and maybe Orioles. What better place to get in on the action? Are you new to FanDuel? New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about the other big pieces that the Capitals drafted and selected in the 2025 draft. One of those players I actually had on my board in Gästrin, and I think he will be a good option. Primarily forwards, one defenseman, lots to like. Let's dive into it in segment number 2 here. And, the good vibes keep rolling around the Capitals. And, when you talk about it, the Capitals had 5 total picks this year. And honestly, I liked their strategy. Let's jump to round 2, pick 37 overall. Swedish center Milton Gästrin. He's one of the ones I circled. And if you want to do yourself a favor, go take a look at some of the highlights footage of him. Dynamic player, that is for sure. And this one could be a real steal, in my opinion. Many had him ranked as a late first rounder, and he slips to 37. Caps must have been thrilled. And, kind of like in a lot of ways when you're talking about Miro, when you're talking about Crystal, that, man, I can't believe this guy is available. He is available. Let's seize the day. And they did that. And what do I like about him? A smart two-way player with size and vision and good at the net front. That's what I like. Connor McMichael vibes a little bit. If you see him, can hang out in front of the net, get those greasy goals, second, third opportunities, maybe a deflection, a lot to like. And they ask him who they kind of model themselves after. And 2 big names. One of them should really ring true and close to home. He models his game after, get this, Gabriel Landeskog and Nicholas Backstrom. Wow. You just want to shoot for the moon. And what better, 2 better players to idolize, both Gabriel Landeskog and Nick Backstrom, 2 knockout players. You know that for sure. You can't write a better script for the Capitals, right? Now fast forward to round 3. And now we're getting down the list here. Caps trade down a couple spots and take Maxim Schäfer, a big German winger who had 35 points in just 15 U20 games. But I still think a big piece. And like I say, when we're talking about this, we're talking not about next year. We're not talking about the year after that. We're talking a ways down the football field. So to think that you are going to see these players this year, no. Next year, no. It's going to be some time, but it's all about building a winning product. You don't just build these things year to year. You have to have a plan year and year to advance. And I think Maxim Schäfer is big. That's a wild pace. Now, this guy's all about forecheck, plays with intensity, has NHL size, might be a bottom 6 guy one day. A lot to like here. And again, to fully understand these players, a lot of their footage is available on YouTube, various other platforms. Really great. So let's talk about the latter rounds. They rounded out with Jackson Crowder, another big guy, a 6'3" center from the USHL, hard-nosed, checking forward, committed to Ohio State. So again, still playing college hockey here. I think a good upside. Again, what's the common denominator when I talk about these guys? Size, 6'3". The next player I'm talking about, Aron Dahlqvist, 6'4", defenseman, defenseman there. I like that as they are looking for defenseman of the future from Sweden. Absolute tank is what I'm going to, summarize him in. Hits like a truck, defensive-minded guy who saw SHL time already. And, people oftentimes on the show, they'll ask me if I do other podcasts, you say prototypical Capital, big guys. There's not a lot of small players on this team. And I think that fits the Capitals very well. Tom Wilson, Ryan Leonard, Protas, PLD, a lot of bigger guys. I mean, there are some sprinkled in there, but this team is building a reputation as being big and hard to play against. So what's the theme here? Size, grit, and upside. These weren't reaching for flashy names. There were some big names that no doubt will change the outlook of those franchises for years to come. I'm talking about you Islanders. I'm talking about you here, Sharks. You're building something big. And tip of the hat to you guys. Much respect as an NHL fan. Your teams are going to be a lot better. I talked to some of these guys, Gil from Locked On Islanders and Locked On Sharks here. These guys, just year after year, believing it's going to be better some year. It's going to be better here in the immediate future for these guys. I do believe it. But the Capitals, all things considered, a great team right now. Hey, made it to the playoffs, second round, that a lot of these players I'm talking about right now are just cherries on the top, the building blocks of the future. They took guys who play the right way, project well, and have character. Those are all the things that we like. And of course, in later episodes, I will drill down a little bit more on a granular level on these players. But this is a 30,000-foot view just to get you guys caught up with who the Capitals selected. But all things considered, I'm absolutely loving the moves that they made. And again, I think the Capitals are in a much, much better position now than they were before the draft. And I think that that's kind of a no-brainer. But hey, in years past, I've seen some of the teams out there kind of just screw it up, that they maybe did draft for a position rather than the best player. The Capitals, Mahoney, Patrick, knocked it out of the park yet again. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about trades, behind the scenes, and draft vibes. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in segment 3 here, we're talking about trades and behind the scenes and the draft vibes. Like I talked about off the top, it was the decentralized draft, and all things considered, I liked it. Ross Mahoney said big picture, he liked it, that he didn't have to whisper because when you're at the draft and, in the big room there's tables all around you. They're trying to listen to see what you're doing, maybe peeking to see what kind of notes you have. That I think the decentralized thing is the right idea. I guess it remains to be seen the future of how the NHL chooses to proceed. As me, I liked it a lot. I guess you'd have to ask the other GMs their thoughts on it. But just as an outsider, it did appear like it worked well. So let's talk about that. Trades and draft night atmosphere for a bit. The Caps made some small but smart moves on day 2. They flipped pick 93 to Ottawa for 96 and a 2027 7th. Then they dealt Chase Prisky and pick 123 to the Wild for pick 180 and defenseman Declan Chisholm. More on him in the next episode of Locked On Capitals. But one thing that stood out to me on draft night, a lot of the teams went for theatrics. The Capitals didn't do that. What did you see out there if you watched the draft? Or if you didn't, I'll catch you up here. You had celebrities like Adam Sandler, Charles Barkley, and even other big names as well, but not the Caps. They let Gary Bettman handle the Lakovic pick, quiet and businesslike. I guess I don't hold it against these other teams for having Sandler and Barkley and these other guys, of course. But I like it. The Capitals are a very business team. I'm not saying that they don't know how to have fun, but all things considered, they took care of business, and there was no guessing. There was nothing like, well, what are we going to do? You saw Ross Mahoney talking into the ear of Chris Patrick absorbing everything that he said, and they continued to execute every single selection that they had. A masterclass that I think is going to pay dividends in years to come. So Capitals fans, I know I host a show for the Capitals here on Locked On, have a lot of faith in this team. And if there's one thing you know from listening, I am hard on players. I'm hard on the team. So this isn't just me pumping the tires, but again, I really think that you should feel happy about this organization and what they did in this year's draft. Big picks. But like I said, picks that you're going to not fully appreciate for years to come. But the big thing is also to circle these players. And if you have time, check in on them from time to time with their respective teams and see how they're playing and how they're advancing. You're able to do that and see that with Ilya Protas and these other players as well. Cole Hudson. I'm talking Andrew Crystal. That sometimes, the Capitals media core, and maybe I'm guilty of it somewhat, I try to be pretty objective about it. Don't cover some of these prospects. Do that, as these players are going to be the future faces of this team. And all things considered, I really liked what I saw. And I think that does. It tells you a lot about the organization and their business and they're focused. They're not trying to win the night on Twitter. They're trying to win next May and June. And again, and in the next episode, I'll talk about pieces that might be in flux, but I liked it. But the one other thing that's interesting, Moose Jaw. Some people are like, well, what is the deal with Mahoney and Moose Jaw, as there's been players selected from there? Well, Ross Mahoney lives like 35 minutes for Moose Jaw. If you didn't know, now you know. He's been watching Lakovic for a while. That's not coincidence. That's a front office that knows its targets. And I know that the Capitals have active scouts all over the place scouring these young prospects, and they spoke about it as much. But, when you talk about it, there was some question out there, and I heard this on socials about these players, and there was some question about Lynden Lakovic, if, that was the player that they truly wanted, or was it not the case. I really do believe that they had him circled, and I think they're starting to kind of build this whole thing for the future because we have the Ovechkin era, and we know that ostensibly this is going to be his last season in the NHL, that you have to kind of start, pacing yourself for the future and what is ahead. And that is what the Capitals did. They just quietly executed some really great decisions. And the behind the scenes stuff, I think that, like I said, it was a great night. If you were an NHL fan, to just see some teams that got better. And I'm going to go ahead and put the Capitals in that mix as well, as the moves that we saw that they made, that this team is improved in a big way. The thing that's interesting is, and unfortunate, I guess, to a certain regard, is I wish there were more better options available, or maybe the Capitals did select a defender. But at the end of the day, they got the defenseman that they want. But it's all about building for the future. And I guess if there was one thing, if I was going to walk away from this draft and say, hey, Dan, what's one thing that you would have changed? I guess there would be two things for me. Another defender instead of a forward, I guess, if I could mix and match here. And potentially there was rumblings out there as well about picking up another netminder. I know that the pipeline is full, and I know that there has been some recent signings, but the Capitals, if you want to talk from a developmental point of view, the Capitals goaltending development is one of the best in the entire NHL. That there was talk of that, and I think that they had their eyes on a couple different options in net, but it didn't happen this year. But if you are a fan of the Capitals, over year after year after year, generally speaking, they do. But those are the only things I would change. Big picture, 30,000-foot view, I think they knocked it out of the park. My only thing I would have changed is another defender and maybe a goalie. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.